I'm nearly 31 years old, and I just, for the very first time, went to a psychiatrist. I don't have a lot of medical or mental health experience. I've spent a lot of time self-reflecting, researching, reading, and healing myself in a way. But I got to the point over the last few months where that wasn't possible anymore. A lot of things have happened this last year, from my business taking a financial hit to getting married about 7 months ago and finishing the conversion process to become a practicing Orthodox Jew. So the support structure that I had helping me function in life kind of collapsed, and the obligations and structure that I needed to survive increased. And that has led to a spiraling and a shifting and a struggle. I want to read something that I wrote about a month and a half ago, where I was finally getting to the end of my rope. Before scheduling an appointment with a psychiatrist and officially getting a ADHD diagnosis and starting on a medication plan. I have in this video a list of 10 traits or 10 things that indicated that I had ADHD or the potential for ADHD that I wish I would have paid closer attention to earlier in life. They would have and certainly could have helped me orient myself and tap into the unique abilities that I have quicker. The impact that medication has is substantial and extremely notable. And I was one of those people that for years would have said that ADHD is just a way for a school system and a pharmaceutical system to make kids who don't want to sit still sit in class. Take annoying kids and make them behave. Turns out I was one of those annoying kids that needed more than anything, desperately, for people around me to notice that I was struggling and understand why. A month and a half ago. A month passes without even fully realizing just how much time you are losing. I'm still fighting the same battle over and over again, as if growth and forward movement is completely out of reach. Some weeks are good, many are bad, and I find myself stuck in an endless loop of neglect and disappointment and failure. That's how I felt. The end of my rope. I had no more answers left. I had nothing else that I knew to do. It worked for me for many, many years. I mean, throughout school, I moved and switched houses and switched schools often enough that people knew I was intelligent. They thought I just didn't really apply myself. And it made sense why I wouldn't. I was dealing with the death of my mother. I was in a household that was in constant flux. So yeah, a kid like that's going to have some challenges and struggles, and if he's not performing well in school or doesn't find much interest in school, that's all right. In college, I was kind of on my own. No one to hold me accountable, and I did just enough to get by. I also had an independent major, and so it was really my own prerogative that led to my degree. I think I probably wouldn't have graduated if I'd been in some type of structured, oriented system without the help that medication I now know can provide. Throughout my 20s, ever since I graduated from college, I've worked entirely for myself, meaning that there's been no one to bump up against, no one to check on my bad days, no one to see me putting off and procrastinating stuff that needs to be done. And the stuff that I've let slip and slide along the way have cost me in a lot of ways, but in your 20s, maybe it matters a little bit less than it does in your 30s and 40s. Maybe it ends up catching up to you eventually. I know that as I've grown my business over on Quackalope, as I've gotten married and increased the rigor that I've applied myself when it comes to my faith and my religion, I found myself unable to do things that other people around me have just been able to do. Pull myself away from social media, sit down and pay a bill, calculate and follow along with my finances so that I'm responsible and prepared for tax season when it comes. Create a schedule and a structure. I've been unable to orient myself in the way that I so desperately desired to. So, 10 signs that I had that I wish I would have known before. 1, underachieving. I was always one of those kids that could talk myself into and could have performed in advanced placement classes in college and school, balancing multiple things at the same time, but I never did. And the truth is that because of this thing, I never could. It wasn't without a desire to be able to achieve, to be able to get the respect and not let down the people that were around me, that cared about me, the teachers and parents and grandparents and friends who invested in my success. And yet I always found that I couldn't sit down and write that paper. I couldn't finish the homework. I couldn't, unless I was very, very motivated, complete the work that was set before me. I always put off, procrastinated, and finished the project moments before it was due. Always to represent and reflect what I was able to accomplish. And those around me knew it. I was put in advanced placement classes for a reason, because I was good and articulate and smart, and the teachers could see that I could perform, and yet I wasn't. There was a sign there that something larger was at fault. And medication, as I now know, would have helped dramatically with that. Procrastination. I think I procrastinate every single thing I ever tried to do. From spending 5 minutes before washing the dishes or in the middle of washing the dishes to look for the right thing to listen to, the stimulation to be engaged in, the podcast or YouTube video to watch. From completely avoiding high-level tasks like texting your dad back, or your friend, or your grandma, or calling the person that's willing to pay you good money to come be a photographer. I've had a habit of procrastinating and done my best to war against it, and yet, because the way the ADHD brain works, procrastination is really a desire to find and seek out stimulation. If your brain is dying and starving for dopamine and other neurotransmitters, the reward system, the pleasure system, you find it in every area that you can. And that's certainly not in writing a good, thorough research paper full of correct citations, punctuation, and grammatical consistency. Hyper-hobbying is something that, for me, has always stood out. I'll become absorbed in something for a season, spending vast amounts of money, time, energy, consuming, researching, and getting as much knowledge as possible in the shortest window I can squeeze it all into. I remember when I got into golf. I bought clubs, I looked up courses, I went golfing, I bought a practice net, I watched hours and hours of videos about perfecting your swing, and then the season changed, and I moved on to something else, and I still love golf, and I have a lot of knowledge about it, but I'm not absorbed or fixated on it anymore. There's an idea in the ADHD system that's called hyper-focusing. ADHD is not actually a lack of attention. Instead, it's an inability to put the brakes on. There's too much stuff that you're focusing on. There's too many things racing through your mind, and you're constantly looking for the thing that will be the most stimulating. And so, for me and for many other people, you become hyper-focused or hyper-fixated on one individual thing, and that creates a dopamine reward system that makes you feel good and pleasurable until you move on from that and then shift to something else. I have many things I've learned over the years due to that hyper-fixation or that hyper-hobbying. I'm grateful for it in some ways, and yet controlling and directing it would probably be a better option. Taxes, bills, and other general documents that require you to sit, look, focus, and maybe pull some numbers together, I have avoided them like the plague for the entirety of my life. I have always relied on, for instance, my car insurance company to call me every 6 months to remind me to go ahead and pay my bill. And then I have to pay it immediately or I'll forget and potentially miss it. Taxes are a nightmare, and if I didn't have a good accountant, I would be I would be completely unable to run my business and manage the books the same time. I even struggle with things that don't go on auto pay. I don't know how to remember from month to month what is due, when it's due, and, well, find it within myself to call and navigate the network of connections you need to make sure your bills are paid. Right now, in my life, I don't quite know where my student loans are. I should look those up and add them to my list. I have no idea how, other than a auto-deduct system, this house is paid for. My wife's house is paid for. I'm not sure where our car insurance is tied to, or where all of our electricity, gas, and other appliances work from. I should probably learn all of those things, but my diagnosis is about 2 days old, so maybe I have a little bit of grace. It's a very interesting and fascinating thing that normal people, not the 5% of the population that have ADHD, can kind of just do those things. And it's not fun, but it's possible. For me, it's been entirely impossible, to the point where I would rather have it be neglected and suffer the consequences of the neglect than actually deal with it or be capable of dealing with it in my day-to-day. The motor inside, the constant drive to move, to act, to produce, to create, to achieve, to be doing something other than whatever it is you are doing. I've always felt that. It's why people with ADHD are slightly more likely to be entrepreneurial or to work for themselves, to be more abstract and creative. We have this desire to bring into the world something new because something new is exciting. Working for yourself is invigorating. And yeah, you have to have structures and support systems, but if your brain doesn't operate like everyone else that's sitting around you, then you go kind of cut your own path. I've had this internal progressive drive to pursue whatever it is I'm engaged with and I'm interested in and do my very best at it that I could. And I've always known for a long time that I would be a very motivated but horrible employee. Because I drive myself, I motivate myself, I pursue whatever it is that I'm fixated on. And if whatever my employer wants me to do is not what I'm fixated on, I'm improbable, if not incapable, of achieving it until we come down to the very end of the road, the deadline, the thing that has to be done tonight or else you lose your job in the morning. Another thing that I find interesting is the desire and need for constant stimulation. So if I'm standing and washing the dishes, off of medication, I'm listening to audio in some form. I probably have spent the last 15 years of my life engaged in constant, substantial stimulation in almost every moment of the day. I need music or a book, or I need something, a conversation that's engaging and interesting, not just that fluffy small talk, a podcast to listen to, something to give one of the various pathways my brain is going, a thing to focus on and hear. Having stimulation around me, like music and the environment I'm in, actually provides me the opportunity to focus more carefully when I'm off medication, because the random racing thoughts I have get distracted by the nice ambient music, and one of my thoughts might be able to tie itself down to whatever is in front of me. So when I do things that I enjoy, like playing board games, there has to be something playing in the background. Reading a book, there has to be something playing in the background. And of course, walking, washing dishes, picking up the yard, if I can't listen to something like a podcast or music, I almost can't do the task. It's not as drastic as that, but a need for constant connection and stimulation has been a defining point of my 20s and teens. Racing thoughts. I discovered about 8 years ago that some people have the ability to have their mind go blank. I never understood that. I've always, for my entire life, had multiple racing thoughts in my head at all times. Now, not intrusive thoughts, not thoughts that were keeping me from functioning, but usually thoughts that are oriented around whatever it is I'm doing whatever the environment is I'm in and whatever it is I need to do or should have done. I can always identify those three thoughts, and it wasn't until I tried medication for the first time that I was able to identify no thought or one thought. It's a crazy thing to not have your mind jumping from one rung to another, racing back and forth, sometimes bumping into itself, and feels good in a lot of ways to have a moment of peace. Now, those dancing, racing thoughts can also be a power player when it comes to social situations and moments where you kind of need to dance and conduct the orchestra. As a wedding photographer, I think I was effective at my job because I always had three things going on in my mind at all times. What's the schedule of the day? Where's the bride and groom? Why is grandma walking over that direction? And how do I take a nice picture? That was beneficial. And I'm curious to see how being on medication impacts the creative and conductor within me. But the fact that my mind had, until a week ago, never stood silent is mind-blowing. Family history. Now, I don't have family that have been officially diagnosed with ADHD, autism, or other mental health conditions that I am aware of. My family doesn't share too much of that information as it is, and the diagnosis is a fairly new thing in our society and culture, meaning that it's less likely, but becoming more and more likely, that the genetic predisposition that exists will become more and more evident. I can say that both my dad and grandfather show some degree of what I would attribute to as signs or symptoms, and I am intending on calling my dad and letting him know that I have a diagnostic, to let him look at the ADHD manual and see if he might want to go into a psychiatrist himself, even though he is older and has found ways to function. If he does or has been struggling with ADHD for all of his life, could be a nice breath of fresh air. I don't know that either of them have or have had. However, my grandfather has never owned a TV because if he has one in the room with him, he'll sit and watch it and is unable to pull himself away. He also has a doctorate degree and was a college professor for many, many years, and at the same time, never really completed a project or started a task until the night before it was due, meaning that in the ADHD style, he waited until the pressure built up to finally achieve and get that hit of dopamine by doing so. So there's signs there. Certainly not a diagnostic, but signs and symptoms in other family members, or of course a diagnosis in other family members, is a fairly good indicator. I believe it's about 25%, maybe a little bit higher than that, who have genetic lineage towards ADHD might have it themselves. I wrote down other challenges. I'm not sure what that 10th point is. I'm going to move on to my last one and then maybe double back to see if I can remember. Fidgeting. I have always fidgeted to the chagrin of the people around me, twisting my beard, biting my nails, stopping for a season at a time, and then cycling back into it. When I had long hair, I would twist a knot on the end of it, kind of making dreadlocks, which is just very gross. I play with my hands, move pens, rip paper. I'm always moving and messing with something. Constant stimming or stimulation, a way to ground yourself or distract yourself. If you find yourself doing that, I don't know, maybe it's something to pay attention to. Other challenges. I don't know what that point is. So, we're going to call it 9 things that I wish I recognized in myself a little bit earlier in life. That being said, I'm grateful for the diagnosis now, and I'm looking forward to figuring out how to balance the unique and skillful brain that I have and combine it with medication and good personal habits that should hopefully allow me to be as successful as possible moving into the next season. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Remember, you're someone worth doing something for and about. We'll see you later.